Hello everyone and welcome back to the Skyrim audio adventure. Again, it took me a long time to get this one out, but I'm really happy with it. I don't want the delay, but I do want to take a moment to acknowledge everyone that helped me work on this. Obviously, they're all going to be credited at the end of the video and in the description, but just in general, everyone who helped me by lending their voice. Some people helped me by lending like little snippets of sound effects and audio, and some people helped me by giving me time for this. My wife supported me throughout the entire thing. My family supported me, and I got a new patron. Shout out to the new patron on Patreon, Trent Morledge. You guys are so patient, and here we are finally rewarding that patience with Chapter 5 of Book 2 of the Skyrim audio adventure. The Absence.
The huntress has slain a mammoth!
Amid the cries and cheers of the city, a young Aela hurried over to get a view of the commotion at the front gate. The sky was gray and she could see her breath. The cold of evening star had come. Snow lightly drifted down and tangled itself into her locks. There had been some doubt amongst the citizens of the Jarl city whether profits and crops had been sufficient to see them through the frigid months. However, when Aelerine, the chief huntress of the companions, rode up to the city with a half-butchered mammoth loaded into several carts, that apprehension was quickly replaced by warm confidence. There would be meat to feed them, fat to light them, and hide to clothe them. While these boons would not likely go beyond the Plains district, it would make these darkest times bearable for those who felt them the most. It was only when the district let out its collective sigh did they realize how intently they'd been holding their breath. For Aela, though, the sight of her mother riding proud before the long tusks of the slain behemoth did not bring relief. She knew her mother would come through for the citizens as she always did. She knew she would return safe and victorious, and what's more, on time. Bracknell had left that morning. He had packed his gear, hugged and kissed her goodbye, still smelling of pine and sweat despite his time among the civilized, and struck out across the cold fields. The snow-frosted mountains rose ahead of him, and gales that would sow doubt into the heart of even the most stubborn Nord tossed his hair as he went. When gratitude was given, the mammoth was scattered, and the presence of the heroic Aelerine of the companions was no longer required, she walked to Aela, without even a pause to search for her, and led her up to the Wind District. There were several parapets built into that middle wall of the city. Some were so seldom used they had grown into gardens of neglect. Aelerine and Aela sat on one such lookout, bundled up beneath a thick fur blanket, on a bench facing west, taking in the breath of the hold and the bite of winter.
So then the herd of reindeer bolted. I was beginning to get worried, until I realized why. That's when the whole mammoth herd just appeared over the hill, and I knew I'd have to nab one. Just had to take one of the older and slower ones. The real issue wasn't actually making the kill. It was having to wait for the herd to move on. You know how sentimental they are. That and figuring out how I would transport it. Are you listening? I am.
The girl nodded, though the look in her eyes was distant.
What did I just say was the hard part?
Moving it.
The girl's response was emphatically unenthused. The warrior sighed, steam billowing from her face.
When did Bracknell leave?
The girl jolted at that, as if surprised that her mind had been read. After a long moment, she responded.
Just after breakfast.
You say why?
Said his potato stores were probably going bad.
Well, that's true.
Well, how much more work does he have?
What do you mean?
You said he was only moving up to the mountains to help Riverwood. When will he be done?
Aelerine blew out her cheeks as she thought.
There's a lot of people up in that town. They need to be fed just as much as we do.
I know that.
Aela kicked her feet out impatiently.
But when will he move back to Whiterun?
Well...
The woman paused, sharp eyes piercing the horizon. After a moment, she wrenched her gaze back to the girl curled up beside her. For this task she needed, above all else, to be present.
Honey, I don't think he will.
Why not?
Asked Aela, sounding as meek as a muskrat.
Because a long time ago, he asked me to fix something I couldn't. Our love was strong, and I think we just decided that we didn't want this to be a problem. But one day he realized it was there to stay. And it broke his heart.
What was the problem?
Nothing you need to be worried about, Pup. It's an old problem for old people.
I don't understand.
It's okay. You don't need to understand.
Did I do something?
Aela's small voice cracked suddenly.
I know I get in trouble a lot, and it...
No, He just thinks too much. Most men do. Please, believe me, it has nothing to do with you.
Do you love him?
Of course I love him. And he loves you. And so does Kodlak, and Vinyar, and Tilma.
Then why won't he stay?
It's not that simple.
Aelerine held her daughter close under the blanket.
Life is delicate in Skyrim. It is fragile and fleeting, prone to getting covered in snow. And so is love.
She pulled back to look the girl in the eye.
I love him, and I'm sure he loves me. But sometimes that is not enough. What matters is we both love you.
But how will I know if that will be enough?
At this, Aelerine was stumped. She cycled through the appropriate responses, all things she had prepared for just such a moment. She even felt the coiling of anger rising in the pit of her stomach. With a couple deep breaths, though, she beat it back and pinched Aela's cheek.
You will just have to trust us. We're strong, remember. Especially me. I'll be there for you.
The girl's despair breaking for a moment, she swallowed and wiped her nose.
Mom?
Yes, child?
Why am I not like you?
The woman grinned.
I don't see that we're so different.
Yes, but I'm not strong like you. I don't have the beast like you, but you had it before I was born. So why was I not born like you?
You were born like me,
The companion assured.
but you are growing yet. One day, Hircine will call to you, and your powers will awaken.
Aela sucked down the last of her sniffles.
Really?
Of course. You will be as a wolf among rabbits.
And I'll be able to do whatever I want?
Yes.
Aelerine faltered.
And no. Remember, we are warriors first. We are charged with protecting the rabbits, those who can't protect themselves.
What if hunting rabbits is fun?
Her mother barked out a laugh.
Ha! Spoken like a daughter of Hircine. You may be closer to change than you know.
Aela smiled bashfully for a moment before a thought pulled the grin from her face.
Will it hurt?
Aelerine thought for a moment.
It did for me, but it was also wonderful, intense. The first time always is. I don't know what it will be like for you, honestly. I wasn't born with it. For all I know, you'll put my powers to shame.
Did you know it would pass on?
Not at first. There was a lot that was unknown back then. But by the time you came, I knew you'd share in Hircine's gift.
Aela nodded before looking away.
What made you want to have me?
A clot of snow fell from the roof of the parapet and splashed dryly over the stone wall.
It was cold out.
Aela was taken aback.
What?
Her mother laughed, drew her close, and tousled her fiery hair.
I had you because I knew you would be amazing.
What does that have to do with the cold?
It's just a joke.
Aela extricated herself from the vigorous affection.
No, tell me!
Well, you were born in Frostfall, right?
Yeah?
And so was Amran, and Goglauk, and Myrdal, Adrian, Lilari.
Yeah.
Well, during times like this, when the winds are chilled, the sun is dim, and the nights are long, people wind up tucked away inside for most of the days. They get bored, then they get close, and start cuddling up together, and 9 months later, the children arrive.
The girl blinked.
So people really have babies because of the weather?
Aelerine fought against the rising of a wry smile.
Well, there's more to it, but it helps.
Why?
Because it's warm, and fun, and it passes the time.
Aela started kicking her feet out alternately, head leaning from side to side as she did.
I don't know that I see myself having a child.
Aelerine's smile softened.
Neither did I when I was your age, or even once I'd grown. But I'm glad I did. It means I got to meet you.
But, again, with the cold, why? Isn't it a bad time? Then the first thing the child knows is bitter cold and a hard winter.
Trust me, folks make babies at all manner of times. During thunderstorms, during wars, during blizzards. Roniaka's parents made her just after giants chased them off from their homestead.
Why?
That's just what people do. When it's dark or scary and they don't know what tomorrow holds, they reach out to touch warmth, to touch hope. Hence, children.
Aela's brow furrowed.
What do children have to do with hope?
Her mother's smile seemed warm enough to melt the frost in the eaves.
To have a child is the ultimate act of hope. There is nothing so definitive. You are our hope.
But if children are the embodiment of hope, why are they such unrelenting little shits?
Aelerine's eyes narrowed at her daughter.
Did Brack teach you to say that?
As the summit of Sheer Point faded to an imposing silhouette in the shade of night, a dim glow bloomed at its base. A small hamlet, little bigger than Palewatch, so out of the way it hadn't even settled on a name. To locals, it was named Lost Hill. To travelers, it was Sheer Step. Darkness was nipping at their heels by the time the intrepid pair had crossed the great saddle and climbed the foothills to the town. A pair of golden-sashed guards reclining in haystacks raised their heads as they rode through the outskirts, but didn't intercept them, returning to their lethargy. The hunter wondered if the news of the massacre at Laurie's farm had reached them. Surely it must have. It had been, 3 days? Perhaps they simply felt that they were too isolated to worry about such things. No major roads came through Sheer Step. In fact, as Aela explained, if Quicksilver hadn't been discovered in the Sharp Mountain, the town wouldn't exist at all. Pebble was eager to get a drink and get the weight off her back, but not as eager as the sore hunter was to get off the beast. The buildings were heavily thatched, more so than those of the Wind District, likely due to the altitude. Like many mining towns, the streets seemed to radiate out from a point, the mine. Faces, Nordic, Imperial, and Dunmer, drifted by in the gloom. Some of them gave Aela double takes, but by and large they were ignored. Her fiery hair was conspicuous, but her travel cloak kept her armor from giving away their affiliation. The mountain had eaten about a third of the starscape above, when they found a small tavern simply called the Absence, and hitched Pebble to the trough.
I'm gonna see about accommodation,
Aela said, stretching her hips.
You wait here with Pebble and try not to look too conspicuous.
The hunter looked at her strangely as he stepped gingerly onto the patio. Well, if that isn't the lake calling the puddle wet, I don't know what is. Aela blinked.
Point.
And reached for the door. Aela! The hunter's hand shot out and caught her by the wrist. She turned to him, face serious.
What is it? Do you sense something?
No. Just allow me. And as carefully as an angler threads his hook, he delicately opened the door and waved her by, a satisfied look on his face. Aela was incredulous.
I know how to open a door.
The hunter shrugged. News to me.
You've seen me do it.
And yet I remain unconvinced.
I'll convince you right in the nose.
Huh?
Huh?
The pair stood a moment, eyes locked, one scowling, one trying not to smirk.
Go watch the fucking horse,
the huntress eventually said before disappearing inside. Oh, you hear what she just called you, Pebble? The hunter said, leaning on the railing next to the hitching post. Is this what you deal with every day? I don't know how you stand it. The mare beside him had dove her head into the water-filled trough. I wouldn't take that lying down if I were you. She finished drinking and blinked at him in that placid way of equine. Yeah, I guess you're right. He dropped his head into his arms and spread his legs conspicuously wide. Oh, fire, he groaned. Come now, Skyrim. Do your thing. Bring the wind. Bring the chill. A nasty thought occurring, the hunter scooped some water to his face and sniffed. It seemed fresh enough, and, most importantly, clear of urine. His opinion of the town brightened.
You're a stranger around these parts, aren't you?
Came an unfamiliar voice. I'm a stranger wherever I go, the hunter began, raising his head to look around. He froze. No one was there. Leaning forward and back, he peered around the posts of the tavern front. Still nothing.
Over here, outsider!
Sitting there in the middle of the road, in a pool of light cast by the proud pair of moons above, was a small, furred creature. Round ears, beady eyes, and a pale pair of rodent incisors. Had the ears been longer, he might have thought it was a rabbit, especially with how it stood up on its haunches looking at him. He would have thought it a squirrel had its tail been longer, but no, it was quite small. Surely then it was a gopher, but alas, it was too large. He turned towards the road, and his eyes adjusted. Much like how one suddenly becomes aware that they are looking at hundreds of ants, he suddenly realized that there were at least 20 of these creatures, all perched up around the front of the inn. The hunter looked to Pebble, who seemed unperturbed, far too busy with the water in the trough. Focusing on the foremost creature, the hunter took a step forward. Is that you talking?
Of course! Who else would it be?
Came the voice again. None of the little rodents had moved or done anything to indicate that they were speaking. How are you talking?
Same way you are, I should think. Unless you're casting the words into my mind and just mouthing along so I think you're speaking. Which, if I may say, feels a bit redundant at best. And try hard at worst.
Well, what if I lost my voice somehow?
Fair point. Is that what you're doing?
No. Is that what you're doing?
No. What? Do I look like a wizard to you?
The hunter tilted his head, peering at the small creature. Honestly, I'm not sure.
Not sure? How many wizards do you know dressed like this?
He felt like his eyebrows might rise so high they just drifted into the night. I can't say I've seen any.
Gosh, you're a bit dense, aren't you? Oh, I thought outsiders were supposed to be, quite windswept and interesting.
You'll have to settle for windswept. The hunter smiled awkwardly. What are you doing out here?
Selling nuts, berries, and many gifts to the wild. Would you be interested?
You have no idea, the hunter muttered. It's a bit late. Don't you sell at the market? He paused. Is there a market here?
Aye, there is, but I'll tell you what.
The furry thing bent down and nibbled at its belly.
It's a good business and that, but it's loud as sin. And there are days when I just can't get anyone's attention.
I can't imagine that's the case. Are all of you there?
Aye, but they don't go far in a crowd.
Are you the only one that talks?
Of course I am. What do you...
The furry thing scratched behind its ears.
Wait. Bollocks that the moon's moved. Hang on.
At that, a sharp whistle sounded, and the crowd of creatures jumped into action, all turning and scurrying on stunted legs toward the shadows on the far side of the alley. All at once they went, as if draining from the scene. Out of the shadow came a booted foot, just in time for him to see the last creature leap and clamber up the emerging leg. The man who stepped into his vision was unremarkable save for his suspiciously bulky overcoat. Dirt-colored clothes and a stringy collar peeked out from under the coat, and the hunter had a suspicion that they were not the only things peeking out. The man bore an unkempt blonde beard, shameful for a Nord, and a bald head with ink markings climbing the back of his skull.
Sorry,
he said.
Didn't mean to give voice to the shadows just then. I'm not going to sell much like that, am I?
Was that you the whole time?
Of course. What do you think? Me marmots was speaking?
The hunter gave a bashful grin as words escaped him. The man's eyebrows shot up.
Skies above! You did, didn't you?
For a moment, yes.
What kind of a man believes that?
The hunter shrugged. Wouldn't be the oddest thing I've seen, honestly.
Well, colour me intrigued.
Likewise. He leaned side to side, taking in the coat. What did you call those things?
Marmots.
They look like squirrels.
It's very kind of you. At a distance, most people think they're rats. Burrow as they are, baying of horses, I tell you. Sometimes it seems like they've hollowed out the whole tundra.
The hunter smiled. Little Dwemer, eh?
Aye. There's loads of them up on the slope.
We don't get many up by Riverwood.
That's where the smell comes from.
Pine and cedar?
And dirt.
Well, I'm a hunter. Most days I'm rolling around in it.
What in dirt are you doing way out here?
I'm on my way north. For the fishing. There's word of some grayling salmon up in Lake Yorgrim. The lie came surprisingly easy.
Yorgrim? A bit underdressed for the snows up there, aren't you? And what's that you got on under your rags? Mail? What, salmon swinging swords now?
Halberds, more like. The hunter chuckled. It's a long road. Didn't want to take any chances.
Oh, 'tis that. You seen any trouble yet?
Seen? No. I've heard some dreadful news to the west.
The Lorinus farm.
Yeah, I think that's right. You've heard of it.
Heard of it? The guards won't shut up about it. The way they talk in the taverns, you'd think they wanted nothing more than to bring that evil down on us. Inviting it they are, the boastful brats. When you stare too long into oblivion, it always stares back.
Sounds like that comes from experience.
Yes, well, it's hard to go long in this world without running into some strangeness or other.
Has any of that strangeness been floating around town?
Nah, not that I can say. Some kids have taken to staking out that old dragon man outside town, looking for spirits and creepers they are.
The old Nord waved a hand dismissively. In the movement, the hunter saw his coat shift in several places in ways that seemed unrelated to the motion.
But that's just kids, you know.
Oh, trust me, I know. A hand reached out for his.
Got a name there, wandering angler?
You can call me stranger. The Nord barked a laugh.
Stranger? Ha! How does the rest of you? Oh, Binwick. I've been to the folk around here.
It's a pleasure, Binwick.
Likewise. So, which road are you taking north then?
I hadn't given it much thought, actually. Why do you ask?
Not for nothing, but I'll be minding the east road to the heights and the Gabba sheer point.
Is it treacherous this time of year?
It's always treacherous. But point being, we had some wizards pass through town a couple of months back. They had a desperate and ill-treated look to them. A dangerous look on most men, let alone a pack of bloody mages. Anyway, they took off that way, saying something about an old castle. I'd leave that well alone if I were you.
What sort of castle is out there?
Not sure what they were talking about. There are no settlements that way unless you veer south to the Valthame Towers.
But you haven't heard from them since?
No peep, which is fine by me. The less we hear from wizards, the better.
The hunter nodded, offering a thoughtful pout. Then the low road it is. We can go west and skirt the Pale.
Yeah, that's best as I see it.
The hunter's eyes drifted back to the man's shifting garment. So you trained them, then? The mammoths?
Marmots.
The man corrected him. Marmots, sorry. The hunter chuckled. Not mammoths.
I thought you said mammoths.
The man grinned.
It'd be considerably harder walking around with 20 mammoths in me pockets, wouldn't it?
Indeed, you'd be a lot shorter for one. The pair laughed a moment together, and the hunter suddenly felt a shade guilty for lying to the man. So it's 20? He asked once the rumbling had settled.
Aye, thereabouts. Little tykes, some of them.
How are they fitting? Are you sure you aren't just a marmot yourself?
I think I'd know if I was. No, they just sort it out amongst themselves.
But are they trained? They come at your call.
Well, I ain't want to go tooting my own horn, you know, but it'd be fair to say so, yeah.
I won't ask how, but why?
Well, you know how these things happen from time to time. I give them a warm home out of the chill, and they help me collect berries.
Really?
Aye.
Reaching behind him, the man drew a tilted cart out of the shadows.
Have a look for yourself.
Stout wheels creaked as it came, laden with buckets of tiny dark fruits and half-cracked nuts. The hunter looked on, astonished. Stony walnuts, rough junipers, and delicate mulberries. Is that what I think it is? He asked, pointing at one particularly low bucket. A few handfuls of dark, almost black berries were nestled inside, among bright scarlet leaves.
Twin huckleberry, that is,
confirmed Binwick.
Aye, there's a few thickets of it further down the valley.
Well, I'll be a beard with legs. The half-breed grinned, reaching for an empty pouch. How much to fill this?
For the huckleberry?
The Nord squinted at the sack.
Call it 2 silver.
Ah, silver. Okay. The hunter sheepishly ruffled through his pockets. Will you take 3 copper? Binwick's eyes narrowed, and he began to slowly return the cart to the shadows of the alley. Wait, what if I threw in some bear's teeth?
You what?
For the first time in the whole conversation, the man looked aghast.
Teeth?
Yes.
Where in the blazes did you get bear's teeth?
From a bear's mouth?
Was the bear dead?
Of course. What do you take me for? They both were.
There were 2?
Binwick took a step back.
You killed 2 Skyrim bears?
No, well, yes, kind of. It was sort of an accident, you see?
An accident? What in nerd do your accidents look like?
Well, maybe not an accident. The hunter cast his eyes up, looking for an answer that didn't paint him as a monster. There was look, it's a long story. The pair stared at each other a moment in silence.
What sort of a man tries to pay for food with bear's teeth?
Well, what sort of man lets a host of marmots live in his coat?
They choose that. They're minding their own selves. You come along, talking all vague, painting yourself as a man who kills bears like he's tripping over a stone.
Well, what about you? Have you washed these berries? I can only imagine the marmots hold them in their mouths when collecting them. How do I know I'm not buying a mouthful of overgrown rat spit?
Marmots are not skeevers. Yes, I do. I do wash them. Thank you very much.
Excuse me, what the hell are you two talking about?
The pair turned to see Aela gazing down at them from the porch of the inn, her features shaded by the light behind her, eyes flashing pale in the moon glow. At her presence, the marmots in Binwick's coat all scurried away, a dark puddle of fur draining from where he stood and disappearing into the dark. It left the man's bulky form substantially diminished, his coat now hanging off him like a gown. Aela quirked an eyebrow.
What was that?
The two men looked at each other awkwardly. Nothing, the hunter piped up. Binwick's eyes darted up to Aela, narrowing.
Do I know you?
No, I'm sure you don't, the hunter interrupted quickly.
What did he say?
Aela called, though he knew she'd heard. He turned back to her. He thinks he might know you.
Oh, no, he doesn't.
No, you don't.
For certain. There's something familiar about you.
Yeah, well, that can happen, you know. The hunter grimaced. Were all the companions this well known? Hey, He caught her name as it came to his lips. Fluffy, you get a room? Aela stiffened, and he mentally prepared himself for a lashing in the near future.
Yes.
She drew out the S like a snake, hissing dangerously. Honestly, the hunter was amazed her eyes hadn't changed. Great. The hunter turned back to Binwick and raised his eyebrows conspiratorially. So, how much huckleberry will 3 copper and teeth get me? Binwick squinted between the odd pair for a moment before finally relenting, with a sigh and a roll of the eyes.
How many teeth have you got?
20. The hunter dug them out of the pouch. Here you are. Taking the coin and fangs from the hunter's hands, the odd man pursed his lips at the bizarre ivory collection.
Here.
He said, putting half the teeth back.
I'll just take 10. God knows what I'll do with them.
Is that enough to fill this pouch?
Of course not. Cup your hands.
The hunter did so, and Binwick carefully filled his hands with the rich black berries.
That is what you get.
Despite the tension of the prior conversation, the presence of berries did wonders to lift the spirits. Thank you. Very generous.
Oh, it is.
The Nord ran a hand over his bald head.
Well, it's a chilly night. Oh, I better go find me friends.
He turned and followed the flock of critters into the night.
Don't go accidentally killing anyone, okay?
I'll do my best. Good luck with your friends, the hunter called, bounding up the steps to the inn, hands still cupped in front of him. Seriously, did you get the room? He asked Aela when he came to the landing.
Who was that?
He shrugged. No idea. Ol'bin, I guess. He lifted his hands to her. Do you like huckleberries?
Stranger.
Hmm?
Don't you ever call me Fluffy again.
Ha! I make no promises.
I mean it. I will skin you like a deer.
Oh, but I'd make such a sorry trophy, don't you think? Bracknell slammed the book closed and sent it sliding across the table with a sense of finality. He had burned his candle low this day. His study partner, Nim, looked equally spent. Night waited, dark beyond the windows. Their venture had taken them the entire day. Neither of them were brutes, but they weren't scholars either. and these were dense tomes. Alas, he was better at reading faces, he thought. Reading Nim's face in the candlelight, he saw that her determination had not been doused by fatigue. Their toil had not been fruitless.
Well,
He gave a ginger stretch, feeling the menagerie of misgivings posed by his body. He had been broken and glued back together. Even served by the most skilled healing hands this side of the throat of the world, he still felt like a well-worn children's doll, every motion igniting protests from hundreds of invisible stitches.
that'll just about do then.
Do you think that's enough?
Nim asked. The old Nord chuckled.
Not in the least, but it might be useful, and so they must know it.
Nim's elvish ears twitched nervously.
Do we have any way of letting them know? Send a pigeon or something?
Of course not. We don't even know where they are.
So we just wait for them to come back?
Bracknell shrugged.
More or less. We just have to sort all this into something they can digest.
Nim's brow furrowed, tail flicking curiously.
How would they eat it?
No, I mean, we need to make it simple, and leave out all the faff that doesn't matter.
Oh,
The half-breed girl produced a sheet of parchment and quill.
omit the shit?
Bracknell gave a surprised laugh.
That's brilliant! Where did you hear that?
Sometimes I hear Farengar mumble it to himself while he's working.
Ah,
He nodded.
I underestimated the prick.
Nim gave a bashful smile.
He's nice once you get to know him.
I'm sure.
Almost reluctantly, Bracknell stood up and arranged the books before him.
Here, where should we start?
Well, the presence of Mulakbal is significant.
True, but I'm not sure how that would help them in the moment.
Nim clicked her tongue.
The presence of sanguine vampires suggests a hierarchy. Pure-blooded vampires and those infected with the sickness.
That's interesting, but pure-blooded or not, a vampire can still kill you.
Against the pure blood, it might be best to run.
True, but by the time they know it, it might be too late. We don't know how to tell the difference, only that there is one.
Nim pouted.
I think we should include it.
The old Nord waved a hand.
Fine, mark it down. And the bit about the sun. It's not instant death, but it can weaken them.
What about the means of infection?
Definitely include that. What was it? Bites, claws, and,
Blood magic.
The girl's blood-red eyes shone like garnets in the candlelight.
Exposure to their magic alone can be enough to transmit the disease.
Yes, write that down. As well as the fact that they have claws. I don't think that's common knowledge.
And what about the folk tale about garlic?
Bracknell rolled his eyes.
You know, I'm dubious about that one. I'm inclined not to believe it. What are we supposed to do? Fight them with a well-seasoned steak?
He was met by Nim's urgent gaze.
But sure, put it down if you like.
Remember, low profile.
Those had been Aela's words as the pair entered the inn, spoken low and slow, as if she were dealing with an obstinate simpleton. The hunter internally scoffed at the reminder. It was as obvious as it was ironic. Did the saber cat call unneeded attention to itself before springing on a reindeer? This mad search for a shadow in the dark would be made only more difficult if the shadow knew they were on its trail. That said, it was hard to say for certain that they were anywhere near its trail. They knew a great many places that the girl and her vampiric captors were not. Now, if only the rolling land would give up where they were. Still, nothing more could be done today. The pair had changed in their room, Aela shedding her armor but keeping her cloak. The hunter shrugging out of his mail shirt and investigating the redness between his legs. After a quick rub-down to mitigate the sticky stench of travel, they found themselves huddled over a table in a secluded corner of the inn, each stirring their bowl of tomato soup with a chunk of half-stale bread. The hunter slurped a red spoonful and grunted.
What's the matter?
The huntress asked around a mouthful of bread. He shook his head in his threadbare shirt. Nothing.
You're sure taking your time over there. I thought you'd be hungry after, you know?
The hunter idly dunked and redunked his bread. Do you like tomato soup? Aela shrugged, her auburn hair threatening to shake free from the hood that hid it.
I don't hate it. I suppose I like it as much as the next thing. Do you not?
Oh, it's just weird. It's more tomatoes in general.
He said, chewing thoughtfully.
To me, they have this
Kind of metallic taste. Feels like I'm eating blood soup.
Strange. It doesn't really taste like blood.
You would know?
Yes, I would actually.
Oh, right. The hunter cleared his throat. How does that work, by the way? Does it taste different when you're all wolfed out?
I don't know if it tastes different.
Aela stroked her chin.
It's just that I like it more when I'm in that shape. Sometimes the gristle is still there when I change back.
You're serious?
Oh yeah, I've had to pick people out of my teeth.
Great peaks. His stomach turned over at that, and he held a fist to his mouth. You know, I'm glad you feel so comfortable around me, but that's an image I don't need.
Shit, you brought it up.
Normally it wouldn't bother me, but now it feels topical.
Our quarry.
That's right. I bet they'd know all the subtleties, like a bunch of blood connoisseurs. Aela chuckled.
Well, you've met them. Do you think there's blood tastings chocked full with blood snobs?
You know, I should have asked. The hunter snickered. Missed my window, I guess.
If this works out, you'll get another.
He sighed through a weary smile. I'll start rehearsing. Aela put down her spoon and lifted her bowl, drinking deeply of the soup.
So,
She said, licking her lips.
you meet anyone new in the time since I've seen you?
Well, yes, but I know what you're really getting at, so no, I haven't.
I really think it would do you some good.
Name someone who'd be interested.
Oh, boo-hoo. I don't want to hear it. Look at your haircut.
Lady, you gave me this haircut. You're as biased as bunting in a burrow right now.
You know what your problem is?
Oh, please tell me.
You just aren't...
Aela's voice faded then, and the hunter took a breath that seemed to last ages. He looked up to her and saw her face still working its way around soundless words. A drumbeat rolled in his mind, and his world began to slow. The gaffer filled a mug of mead from a tap, then handed it to a man with an eye patch and a long dark braid snaking down his back. Next to him, a man with no front teeth lifted his cup for a refill. A woman with gray skin and raven hair stepped down from the second floor. On her hip was a dagger of curious make. A moth circled the candelabra in the corner, growing closer to the flame with every rotation. He swallowed, mouth dry, and looked to his soup. Darkness whirled beneath the red, then a set of pale shapes bobbed to the surface. A handful of ivory corns and a white orb. No sooner did he recognize the small shapes as human teeth did the glassy white eye swivel in its sea of red to stare right at him. His legs locked and his jaw clenched. He could only sit in that moment of silent anguish as a dozen gray, clammy hands crawled their way up the edges of the table. He felt more, icy to the touch, closing around his ankles and throat. The hands at the edges pulled the table apart, and it split into a sucking, festering maw, ringed with hooked teeth. A pressure appeared at the back of his head and began pushing him into the wet darkness.
Stranger?
The hunter blinked. Gone was the eye, the hands, the teeth. Aela sat before him, as mundane as she had ever seemed in her modest clothes and hood, her brow creased by worry. He saw his soup, red, bland, and devoid of viscera. He looked around at the typical activity of the inn. He breathed once, then again. The world, it seemed, had picked up its usual pace. Finally, he looked back to Aela. What?
You okay?
Yeah.
You looked kinda gone for a moment.
Yeah, sorry. I wasn't listening. What were you saying?
I was saying that you'd have an easier time making connections if you put yourself out there a bit. Maybe told people your actual name?
I'm not talking about this.
Or at least pick a better name. I get that stranger is a joke and all, but you're the only one laughing. To everyone else, you're just a fool.
I told you to drop it.
Or what? If I'm stuck with you, you're stuck with me.
I'll wet your bed sheets.
1, I don't use my bed numbnuts. 2, you're going to have to pay for that. And 3, that's pretty gross.
The hunter sighed, picked up his spoon, and slurped some more soup. The memory of his grisly vision turned his gullet, and he had to fight the rising bile. The only thing that's gross is this soup. Hasn't this place ever heard of salt?
Salt? And where would they get salt?
The hunter shrugged. Trade for it?
Yes, but where?
You'd need salt water, so somewhere near the ocean. Dawnstar, or maybe Windhelm in Eastmarch. They're near the coast. One of them has to have a refinery.
Uh-huh. And what else do those two places have in common?
The hunter thought for a moment before slapping his forehead. The Stormcloak Rebellion. Aela nodded with the air of a patient yet condescending teacher.
And Whiterun is neutral, so trade across borders is hairy at best.
What about Hafengar?
Hafengar? The hold ruled by solitude.
Right.
Home of the Imperial garrison?
Got it.
The other side of this fucking war?
Got it. Whiterun is neutral. Aela grinned and crossed her arms behind her head.
Enjoy your soup.
The hunter sighed and took another spoonful. What's the latest on the war, anyway?
Well, Ulfric has dubbed this month the Season of Crimson Snow. Those were his words mixed into a missive sent to every capital.
Crimson Snow. That's the Pale, right? So he's going to make another push in the north?
You'd think so, but I have this feeling it's a diversion. He might be heading south.
Do they still have their foothold up at Bloodlet?
No, the Legion at the pass starved them out last I heard.
So it's a sneak attack?
Or something like it.
Not very Nordly of him.
I don't think he cares.
His rebels might.
Not if they win. Besides, we do the same thing.
The companions?
Yep, that's how we took back Valtime Towers.
Aela rolled her shoulders and lay her head back as if savoring the memory.
It was such a good hunt.
The hunter watched her intently, and after a moment she looked up at him curiously. What made it good? He prodded. Aela sighed.
Do you want juicy details, or is this a tactical curiosity?
Tactical, mostly. Just wondering how you went about it. Did you fall upon them in the dead of night?
The dead of night? What are you, crazy? That's when people are the most awake. Just before dawn is the best time to attack. Everyone is sleepy, hungry, and more likely to ignore any small sounds if it means they can get to breakfast faster.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Which is why we attacked in broad daylight.
You did what?
We disguised ourselves as a small caravan trying to run the roadblock into Eastmarch. Rhea, Hamel, Galdus, Athos, Akai, Silden, and Botki. Silden, in particular, made such a compelling coachman. It was genuinely unnerving. Anyway, Silden got the horses up to speed, then Athos and Botki climbed out and detached them, riding to safety while the carriage rumbled right on and obliterated their little barricade. By the time they knew what hit them, we were already inside the first tower. I was in the cliffs above the road, covering them with my bow. Before long, they were fleeing across the bridge, and I was climbing the south tower to get a good vantage point. They tried to fortify the second tower to cover their escape, but Farkas and Vilkas were waiting in the woods on the far side. They shifted, climbed on in, and the rest I'll leave to your imagination.
Wow, the hunter breathed. So does everyone know about the lycanthropy now?
No, they shifted back and got dressed before they met us. All the whelps think they use ladders.
Ladders?
Funny, right? A wolf on a ladder?
Funny. The hunter fidgeted with his missing finger. Did you find any spoils?
A few coins and jewels for Jorvaskar's coffers. I found a meat pie some poor fellow had bled all over. No weapons of note. They took the towers with cruelty and numbers. We met them at cruelty and made their numbers irrelevant.
Did you eat the pie? Aela gave him a wolfish grin.
Waste not.
Figured. The hunter sighed. I'd normally never complain about a meal, but this is just smashed tomatoes. Seriously, I could cook better than this. Aela licked her lips at a memory.
Don't I know it too?
Oh, fuck you. The huntress grinned.
I will not apologize. It was your soup or your life.
You know what? The hunter jabbed a finger at her. Next carriage we stop, that's your line. Your soup or your life.
You're on. Aela, bane of chefs. Doesn't sound bad at all.
She chuckled.
Help, she's eating all my sweet rolls.
Yes, 'tis I, the sweet roll bandit. Fear me.
Run to your pantries.
Fuck, this is weird.
Aela's face suddenly fell into her hands. What's wrong?
Gods, give me patience.
The hunter leaned forward. What is it?
We should have found her by now. Now we're relaxing. Why the fuck am I relaxing? Why is it so...
Her throat caught around the word. Easy.
Yeah.
He nodded soberly. I don't know. It's my first time trying to rescue someone. I don't know the proper etiquette. You're setting a steamer of an example, though.
Oh, I can't stand you.
And it's back to me now.
You are the bane of my existence.
The woman's eyes were wide as she seethed.
If we don't find her, I'm blaming you.
The hunter stared back, unperturbed. That's awful evil of you, Madam Huntress.
Shut up.
Hero of Whiterun, my ass. I don't deserve a speck of that. Aela deflated in her seat and rested her head on folded arms.
Then I'll blame Bracknell. He's the one who introduced us.
And now it's all gone to shit. The hunter smiled bitterly. I mean, what did he expect?
Balls if I know.
You know what? He perked up. I want a divorce. Aela snorted into her elbow.
Shut the fuck up.
The pair of them cracked like an egg and started snickering uncontrollably. Honey tree?
Nope.
Wildflower?
Stop.
Lover?
Oh, get in line.
Dove of Etheria?
You are being ridiculous.
Don't be bitter, my little tundra bunny. It was never going to work between us. The hunter teased. You, a shield maiden of Jorvaskr. And me? I'm homeless. Aela's grin softened for a moment.
No, you're not.
The hunter opened his mouth, but paused and let out one more guffaw. He dropped his chin to his chest and swallowed, adopting an earnest expression. In case there was any doubt, I'm not taking this lightly. I want to help, but I'm not you. If I'm slowing you down... The hunter suddenly trailed off, looking toward the door.
Stranger, I'm not asking you to be me.
Aela?
Not that you could, actually.
Aela?
There is no one like me.
Aela's self-aggrandizing was cut off as the hunter's hand shot out and covered her mouth. Red fury flashed in the huntress's eyes at the sheer audacity of this ferret of a man. Then, suddenly, they widened as comprehension dawned. Ooh. What? Ow! The hunter withdrew his hand, shaking out the fresh bite mark.
Where?
The hunter nodded towards the door. Aela turned, following his gaze to see a perfectly ordinary-looking man with short dark hair and closely shaven beard. His race was ambiguous, as was his profession. His face was darkened by a matting of dirt, and he had a thin scar on his right cheek. His clothes were hidden under a dark travel cloak. He had turned away and was walking to the bar when Aela turned back to the hunter.
How can you tell?
I'm just getting that feeling, the hunter said, his hand twitching. And that scar on his face isn't real. He smiled when he walked in, and it didn't match up perfectly. It's subtle. I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't felt it first.
What in oblivion are they doing here?
She hissed. The hunter glanced over her shoulder at the suspicious man ordering what looked to be wine. The town. Lots of people out of the way. Could be its next target.
Then the carriage is also here somewhere.
Maybe.
What do you mean, maybe?
He's got dirty boots. Nice boots, too. He was walking.
That doesn't make any sense.
Did you smell the girl?
No, don't you think I would have told you?
Then we've got to make him talk.
Here?
Where else? Maybe we can wait and see where he goes. The wolf of Whiterun shut her eyes and breathed deep.
The thing's scent, it like sponges up its surroundings. I can get hold of it for a moment. We can't let it get away. Fuck! The one time I'm not in my armor. Do you have your sword?
Just a dagger.
Damn it, me too.
Can you hear what he's saying from here? Aela paused, then shook her head.
I can, but it's just the usual peasant fare. Are you sure he's one of them?
Aela, all I know for sure right now is that he's hiding something and using illusion magic to do it. Scarlet boiled deep in Aela's eyes. That heat bore into him, and he saw the answer forming in her mind.
Stranger.
No!
I won't be long, just stay near him.
Aela, you don't know what he's capable of.
And that's why I need to be armed.
He mouthed some response, but it didn't come.
I could follow your scent in a rainstorm. I won't lose you.
He heard in her voice that she had made up her mind. He gritted. Why am I always the bait? Aela stood with the relaxed ease of someone satisfied by a warm, welcoming meal.
'Cause you're good at it.
Pulling her hood lower over her face, she dropped a few coins on the table and made for the stairs. The hunter breathed deep and took stock of the inn. The gray-skinned woman had left. There was a Redgaurd woman pushing broom by a door to his right. He supposed it led to the kitchen due to the smell of bread wafting from it. Glancing toward the window, all he saw was darkness. Pebble had been stored in the guest stables behind the wide building. The moth by the candelabra had apparently chosen life. It was now flitting over the maid's head. A Nord woman with bright blonde hair and sooty dress walked in and made for the fire, where she joined an elderly woman warming her bones. A young man sat in the opposite corner, face black with dirt, staring deep into his cup's expression vacant. The man with the long braid and his fellow with the missing teeth were still at the bar making animated conversation. It seemed that they had roped the suspicious figure into their drama. The newcomer was nodding and gesturing with a pointer finger between sips of wine. His skin was pale but dappled like a plume of buckwheat. He had high eyebrows that faded noticeably as they reached towards his temples. The temples themselves were deep set. He thought of the prominent brows Hurt and her husband had displayed once he'd seen through their illusions. Perhaps those temples were a common way of hiding the ridges. Alas, it had been the eyes that had really given them away, and this individual was looking decidedly in the other direction. What felt like a minute passed, and the hunter's focus remained fixed on his prey. On occasion, the illusioneer would appear to turn, and the hunter had to find a new focal point. Sometimes it was the woman by the fire, or the moth over the maid, or his own hands, bracketing his empty bowl of soup. He had never appreciated just how hard acting natural was. Was he sitting too still or moving too much? How fast had he been breathing before the man or thing had walked in? He couldn't remember. He knew how to fly, fight, and freeze. He'd had to do plenty of that during the fight with the beast. But this was different. To ignore? Watch without watching? He knew how to irritate, aggravate, and alienate. He seemed to do that without trying. Then again, that last talk with Aela hadn't taken a dive like the others. Did this missing girl have some personal significance to her? He was almost scared to ask. He realized suddenly that he had grown absent. Shaking himself into the moment, he looked back toward the man at the bar, only to see that his quarry was staring right back at him. Those eyes seemed to flicker, and pain was sent screaming through his right hand. His eyes snapped back down to the table, to the coins Aela had left. That was enough to pay for the meal, right? He played with them idly for a moment before standing and making for the door. He would check on Pebble. She had to be getting lonely after all. The wood creaked underfoot. No one would stop him. He would not look at them nor pay them any mind. No sooner did he reach the door did he find himself sitting back in his chair. Across from him, the mysterious man had taken Aela's seat. Black eyes, roiling like drowned suns, pulled at him from in those deep sockets. A hand rested on the table, turning an imperial silver on its axis. The hand was sallow, tipped by jagged nails that may as well be claws. The cloak was open, showing an odd layered garb, half armor, half regal furs. It was simultaneously harsh and aristocratic. His nose was stunted, giving him a permanent sneer. When he spoke, the hunter could see the flash of fangs behind his lips.
If you stare any longer, I'd have to charge you. Normally, I wouldn't hold it against you, but I get the sense that you're different. You can see me, can't you?
The hunter strained to answer, but found that his breaths were coming too slow to speak.
I thought perhaps it was the mongrel in you, but now that I'm here...
He sniffed at the air.
No, that was your partner, wasn't it? So, what are you then? With your ill-treated look, your curious company, and your uncooperative mind.
The hunter felt a weight descend on every inch of his body. From his seat to his fingertips, he felt as if something was pressing him down. He thought if he only lowered his eyes, he'd find his eyelids pinned to the table. And just when he was sure the force couldn't press any harder, it slipped and passed through him instead. Images flitted before his eyes, a dim forest, a steep mountain face, a lake. He felt the probing touch upon his mind. He knew this touch. It had been soft as a feather before, but now it felt solid and present. He outlined it like a snake caught crossing stone and pushed against it. A woman's screaming face, a flaming metal insignia, the eclipse, a dim hollow nestled into a gorge, a castle on an island. No, a hill. No, an island.
Yeah.
The vampire grimaced, clenching his fist against his head.
Very good. Very good. You certainly are a prickly one, but you've given away your game.
He opened his fist and the coin dropped out, now a wadded ball of silver.
Someone else has already been poking around in there. Someone like me.
A vampire.
The hunter managed, still fighting for air, but hoping he might get the attention of the other patrons. The dark-haired fiend grinned widely, showing his fangs for all the inn to see.
Curiouser and curiouser. You can still speak. Inexcusable. How do you yet live? You have not been given the gift, yet you bear no mark of the thrall. Are you an accident? Yes, perhaps. Someone, it seems, has been getting sloppy.
Vampire!
He growled again. The man's smile widened sickly.
Are you trying to raise the alarm? Oh, look around. I think you'll find that everyone else is very much occupied.
The hunter hardly dared take his eyes off the man, but after a fitful moment they couldn't help but flit around the room. Not a single patron of the absence was moving. All were stock still, stiff as statues in the wavering candlelight. For a moment he thought that time itself had stopped. Then he heard the dripping from the bar. The man with no teeth had been stopped mid-drink, and mead was dripping down his chin. The barman was frozen, toweled fist in a mug. The maid's broom was resting loose in her fingers. Her eyes were vacant. All of them were vacant. Empty, like the hollow men of the mountain. The silence of the inn fell on him like a landslide.
What are you doing?
He hissed.
What's wrong with them?
Oh, nothing's wrong with them. Not yet. They just aren't here right now.
Stop it!
The smile on the vampire's face had reached truly inhuman dimensions.
No, I don't think I will. If I'm being honest, I can't. See, you are a problem. You carry insight that we'd rather not be spread. What we might call a loose thread. And all loose threads must be plucked. It's just common courtesy.
You touch me, you'll have to answer to my friend.
Oh, I'm not worried about that mutt. Her gift is a poor imitation of mine. I can finish up here and see to them the moment they set a foot on those stairs. Besides, I don't need to touch you. I barely need to lift a finger. After all, the thought has to have crossed your mind.
What?
It has been such a trying time. The world every day growing more and more tangled and cruel. How is a vagabond like you supposed to keep up? Find love, happiness, purpose? I'm sure everyone in here will be shocked, your friend included. But none of them will be surprised.
At just that moment, the hunter felt the sting of cold steel press against his throat. Looking down, he saw to his horror that his own dagger was being pressed to his neck. His mind raced for a moment. Was there a second vampire? But he knew that dark smudge between the fingers. He knew that hand. It was his own. He fought against it, tried to slam his hand to the table, but nothing happened. Across from him, the vampire tipped back his wine, finishing the glass.
A fine appetizer.
He sighed luxuriantly.
But I think I'm ready for the main course.
Placing the glass on the table, he slid it across the wood, coming to a stop under the quivering blade in the hunter's hand. The hunter realized then that he was being toyed with. This was fun for the creature. He could have eviscerated him at any moment, but this was simply more entertaining. His stump finger screamed at him, and he screwed his eyes shut as the dagger's edge began to draw.
No.
He grinned suddenly, a gleeful madness dancing through his mind.
I'd rather play a different game.
Drums struck up behind his eyes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. A blade pounding into a table, each strike precariously cushioned between a splayed set of fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Placid skinned fingers ending in claw-like nails. He opened his eyes when he felt the hot liquid running not down his collar, but over his lips. His nose was bleeding. As for his grim companion, the vampire wore a notably annoyed expression, their finger drumming on the table. 1, 2, 3, 4.
How are you doing that?
The hunter smiled at him, mad-eyed, teeth painted red.
Wouldn't you like to know?
The vampire shot to his feet and reached out a hand.
You truly are a nuisance. This way is never as fun.
A flash of fiery red hair, and the fiend was gone. The hunter felt the first delicious breath of freedom rush into his chest before he even registered the breaking of the front window. Aela the huntress had flown in like a crimson bolt and was now pummeling the vampire into the ground. The vampire, for its part, wasn't sitting still. The pair's movements were so fast the hunter could hardly tell who had the upper hand. The huntress was abruptly sent flying up into the ceiling. It almost looked as though she gathered her legs and launched herself back down to her foe. The vampire effortlessly tipped itself upright, and the flurry of blows continued.
Oh, I'm sorry!
He heard the huntress shout. Next thing, the vampire was being whipped through the air like a rag doll and sent crashing clean through the table before him.
Is this not fun anymore?
The vampire hissed up at her, its jaws stretching forward out of its face, its humanity a distant memory. Unfazed, Aela clasped the creature by its throat.
Because I'm having a blast!
She drug it across the room in a flash and slammed its head into the back wall. The first impact was accompanied by the sound of splintering wood. The second sent the vampire clear through into the darkness beyond. In the moment of silence that followed, the huntress drew her sword and glanced toward the hunter. Her steel blue eyes met his briefly. She raised her eyebrows and gave him a reassuring nod.
Put it down,
she said before trudging forth into the gloom. Less than a second later, she was sent flying back into the inn, grappling with a smoky, fanged shadow. The tangled, snarling pair slammed into the ground and dragged across the ceiling, knocking the chandelier loose before soaring out the broken window together. The hunter let out a shaky breath and, realizing he was still holding the dagger to his neck, dropped it. It clattered harshly to the floor. At that sound, the rest of the inn exploded into motion. Shouts and screams reverberated in the cramped space. The barman rushed forward to put out the fire of the fallen chandelier. The maid flitted into the back room, quick as a thought, and every other patron in the bar started scrambling for any exit. He gulped down another breath, feeling the poison recede from his mind. His part was done. The thought disgusted him. He stood, making for the stairs. Aela would be needing help. A moment later, he rushed back and retrieved his fallen dagger. He, on the other hand, would be needing that.
Flee to the west! To the barrow! Keep your heads down!
We need a hand over here.
Get up. You all right? Keep moving.
Mail shirt, tunic, pack, belts, and sword. The hunter was still hastily strapping on his quiver and bow as he ran out of the inn. Sheerstep was a mess. Distant shouts and screams rang out in the dark. Lanterns flitted this way and that, briefly illuminating worried faces. The hunter took a moment to steel himself before wading into the bedlam. One step into the fray, he was nearly swept off his feet by the rush of bodies. He was checked, jostled, and buffeted by dark figures, turning him around several times over.
You're going the wrong way!
An unseen elbow cracked him in the nose, and for the second time that night, he smelled iron. Grunting, he fought the current, losing himself momentarily to the panic, but finding peace in the shape of a wall. He leaned against it, shaking his head as he felt his bloody nose. Closing one nostril, he ejected a red glob of mucus. In the clear breaths that followed, the hunter found the source of the chaos. There was smoke on the air. He ducked into an alley, blindly feeling his way along the wall. Hearing the shouts fade away behind him, he picked up speed, turning left, then right, following the smell of burning wood and the orange glow. Two villagers brushed past him as he turned the last corner and came to the flickering clearing. A pair of thatched houses blazed before him. Tongues of flame licked out of a conspicuous hole in the roof, and billowing sparks were threatening the surrounding homes.
Hurry! Don't drop the water!
Silhouettes dashed to and fro, carrying buckets and shovels. A door burst open to his right and a family hurriedly fled, clinging to each other and the chest between them. Did they think this was a raid? Did anyone really know what was happening? A spark smoldered on a piece of hay near his foot, and he stamped it out before rushing forward. The heat of the fire brought back unpleasant memories, but he didn't feel the fear he thought he might. Spotting a glow emanating from the far side of the second house, he weaved through the brave guards and villagers towards it. Another hole, wood, glass, and stone debris scattered all around the outside. On the opposite wall, the stones were marred by deep scratch marks. They arched and ran and eventually swung upwards. As he stood tracing their path, a nearby guard shouted,
Either help or get out of the way!
The hunter couldn't tell whether or not the yell was directed at him, but it was a galvanizing sentiment nonetheless. He turned back to the mass effort and scanned for some way to assist. The first was a wiry lad rushing forward with a sloshing bucket, obviously struggling with its weight. The second was the presence of 2 more distant glows. The words of the vampire came back to him now. No loose threads. He ran to the boy and gripped the edge of the bucket, stabilizing it. The weight of the water now split between them. They shuffled toward the flames. A rush of cold, and the hunter fell to the dirt, water spilling far shy of its destination. Hot pain flashed through his finger as a shrill scream sounded high above him. The boy beside him was gone, and the scream soon faded to sickly gurgles. The house fire hissed as a torrent of dark liquid rained from the sky. Standing in the air, lit from below, clutching the boy almost tenderly, was the vampire. Its body a swarm of living smoke, its face a stretched, razor-fanged maw, tearing into the inert form. Dimly glowing eyes met his and flashed with recognition. The drained body fell limply into the inferno, and the next moment that twisted mask of death was rushing down to him. A streak of silver steel and dappled fletching caught it as it came, and sent it spiraling to the earth with a screech. In the settling dust, that snarling face looked up. Aela stood on a nearby rooftop, already loosing a second eagle-fletched arrow. The bolt flew straight, needing no arc nor loft to cover the distance. It was easily faster than anything the hunter had ever seen, quicker than a barman catching a spilling cup, swifter than the dark after the snuffing of a candle. But somehow, the vampire was faster. It thudded into the soil, sinking in to a frightful degree. The creature stood above it, dark red energy coalescing in its claws. It was about to cast a spell. The hunter lunged forward, pulling the arrow from the ground and moving to impale the fiend's foot. With uncommon ease, the foot dodged his strike and stomped his outstretched arm. The hunter couldn't help but gasp in pain as his bones bent. It was a cold, unrelenting pressure, so far beyond him a boulder may as well have pinned him to the street. The force grew, if such a thing was possible, and he looked up to the wicked face above him. Its claw cocked back, ready to swipe his head from his shoulders. Suddenly, Aela was there, gripping the arm and knocking the vampire off of him. As if expecting this, the fiend bucked, twisted, and jammed its still glowing hand into Aela's gut. The huntress gasped at the invasion, and her veins bulged, flashing black in the light of the blaze. His heart dropped into his stomach as her skin pulled, her form almost seeming to shrink and buckle. Then came the igniting of red eyes, and she sent her forehead crashing into the vampire's already stunted nose. It grimaced and hissed as its face was cracked. Then, with a speed rivaling her arrow, the huntress drew her dagger and slashed the creature once across the belly and once across the throat. Stumbling back, the vampire grinned at them unperturbed, a fluid blacker and thicker than blood running down its neck. As the hunter fought to his feet, he saw the 5-pronged wound in Aela's side. It was leaking crimson and seemed to glow in the light of the fire at his back. All the same, the Wolf of Whiterun stood resolute between him and the grinning monster. A voice like a swarm of bees crawled out of the vampire's red-soaked lips.
Disgusting mutt! Tainted blood like yours is hardly worth taking.
You're not exactly a snowberry yourself, worm,
she said, voice hoarse. The vampire's laugh was a high, mad thing. It rang out like a choir of the damned before that low, buzzing tone returned.
What fellows is your doing? Had you not interfered, some of them might have lived.
Stranger, you need to run!
Aela?
Run!
She shouted.
I can't do both!
Oh, can't you?
Hissed the creature, bringing its hands together. The hunter's finger flared with pain before the vampire suddenly vanished from view. For the first time since he'd known her, the huntress took a step back, red eyes darting around. Next thing, she was thrown aside, crashing into the stone wall, a fresh dent in her armored shoulder. The hunter backed up himself until he felt the growing heat of the inferno at his back. Suddenly, something slammed into his chest with the force of a sledgehammer, and he was launched back into the house. His world was white pain and bright flame. The fire barely had a chance to lick him before he was struck again. Limbs stiff and useless, he felt a rushing motion and heard the shattering of glass. He landed hard on his back, eyes running with burnt tears. He saw, blurry above him, Aela, her marble skin blackened by soot, her red hair singed at the tips. Her eyes met his, steel blue and large with worry. Then she was tossed aside again, blood spattering from a fresh tear in her bicep. A cold hand clasped him by the throat and lifted him, kicking off of his feet. Air! Between the impact to his chest, the burning of his lungs, and the vice around his neck, breath seemed like a distant luxury. His mind was rapidly sinking into blackness. A high, playful voice rang in his ear.
Oh, mongrel!
He felt himself being shaken like a prize.
I've got your little toy. What are you going to do?
Speech was beyond him as he worked his jaw, clamoring for breath that wasn't there. His thoughts, however, became clear. He was nobody's toy. Gripping the vampire's hand and wrist, he pulled his legs up and threw them over the arm. The vampire hardly had a moment to be surprised before the hunter's boots were crashing into its face. Clinging to the arm like a branch, he stomped and stomped again. It stumbled, and its grip on the hunter's neck slipped, claws raking his skin. The hunter pulled and wrenched, trying to break the arm at the elbow. It wasn't budging, and just when he thought he might be brained against the earth like a thrashing fish, he heard the song of an arrow, and the vampire grunted in pain. The ground crunched against the back of his head as his foe buckled at the knee. An arrow was stuck clean through the joint. Seeing the fiend's foot in his periphery, he reached back for his short sword, and this time succeeded in nailing it to the ground. The creature wailed and spun, throwing him off. His hands went to his neck, and he felt his vital cords, turgid and intact, despite the hot moisture pouring down his front. He blinked up at his foe through dirt and tears to see its form flickering between flesh and smoke. It thrashed and snarled, seeming unable to fly. Just as it reached down for the arrow and blade, 2 more bolts sung into it. With its lightning speed, it moved to block them, but it wasn't enough. One arrow skewered its raised hand. The other ran through its left eye. Stillness found them. A seductive moment where the day had been won. But it was not so. The vampire twitched back into motion like a puppet remembering its strings. Hissing and grunting, it yanked the arrow out of its head and knee. It met his gaze, 2 flaming pits, one a sea of dark malice, and one an empty hole through which the light of the blaze shone.
Enough!
It growled, taking up the short sword. The hunter's arms raised instinctively as the wretch made to throw it. In a flash of steel, the flying blade was batted out of the air, ringing and clattering against a wall. And Aela, once again, stood between them.
Insolent pests! You know you're only making it worse for yourselves. 100 lives. It will be 100 lives for every mark you make. If you will not pay the toll, then your people will.
With that, the smoky hellspawn tore away through the night. In the calm that followed, the hunter tried to stand, but faltered, hands still pressed to his neck, breath only now coming back to him. Dashing over, Aela took him by the shoulder and sat him down.
Move your hands,
she demanded.
Let me see.
The hunter was reluctant, but soon her fingers were curling around his.
Stranger, I swear on my mother's name, if you don't give me those hands...
She trailed off as his opened throat came into view.
Oh, you lucky bastard.
She breathed.
Lay back, okay.
Next thing, he heard the uncorking of a water skin, and cool liquid was pouring over his face, clearing the last of the dirt, soot, and tears. He He saw her clearly now, her hair floating, bedraggled in her panting breaths.
Here, drink this.
She said, pressing a vial into his hands.
That'll stabilize you.
The hunter did so, not even registering the hideous taste.
What now?
Now I need to follow. If it gets too far, I won't be able to track it.
Okay.
You'll stay here. You have no place in this fight.
You need my help!
Rage flashed across the huntress's face.
Oblivion, I do! You nearly just...
She cut herself off and swallowed hard. Clasping his shoulder, she stood. Her grip was reassuring, but heavy enough to prevent him from doing the same.
You've already helped me. We found it thanks to you. Now it's my turn.
Aela?
She turned away from him.
I'll be fine!
Aela!
But she was already gone, borne by those strong legs at unnatural speeds.
Fuck!
The hunter cursed, fighting to his feet. A great pain erupted in his chest, and he crumpled, clutching at the feeling, his brow grinding against the road. It was like an empty, sucking hole straight through the middle of him. He bared his teeth in a silent scream and writhed like a worm on a skillet. It took precious minutes before he was able to move.
Get up!
He gritted. Shaking, he got to his knees and stood.
Okay. Just don't shit yourself.
One foot, and the other. Just like always. His body finally cooperating, he stumbled away, giving the house fire a wide berth as he went. Again, his hands went to his open neck. Something had closed the wound. The streaks over his pipes and veins didn't feel entirely like skin, but the bleed had stopped. What in oblivion had she given him? The flames were dying here, but he knew they were spreading elsewhere. The vampire would make sure of it, and Aela would be right there as well. His legs would not suffice. Tripping several times, he wound his way back to the absence. The building was dark and eerily silent as he skirted around the back. Finding the stables, he nearly broke down the door when he fumbled the first few attempts at the latch. Finally flinging it open, he rushed into the darkness, eyes adjusting too slow for his liking.
Pebble?
He called. It was a shade unnerving being surrounded by numerous unseen creatures, all of whom were substantially bigger than him. But the hunter had been around enough herds in his day that it didn't faze him. In the forgiving gloom, he spotted the pale head of the dappled mare. Opening her pen, he reached for her reins, only to find that she had none. Right. He frowned and started feeling around the walls. Listen, Pebble, we've got problems. Aela's in trouble and... Where the fuck... His hands found the bit and muzzle. How had Aela done this? He stood, bewildered by all the straps and the nonchalant steed before him. Shit, I can't even see what I'm doing. He reached out and felt the horse's hot breath on his hand. He heard movement as it backed away from him. No, you know me. We spent all day together. The animal didn't budge. Look. The hunter stepped to the side of the pen, beckoning to the open door. You can go. Come on. I'm not trapping you. The horse just blinked at him. Shit. Just as he slumped, leaning against the wall, he felt something prod him in the back. Feeling around, he found it was the horn of Pebble's saddle. Who was he kidding? He didn't know how to saddle a horse? He felt the bit and reins in his hand and looked to Pebble. Hey. It's not me, is it? I'd hate to think I was such a cumbersome burden. The mare snorted at him and shook herself, her large muscles rippling under her rich hide. Then what's the matter? Pebble's head dropped, and she nibbled at some hay on the floor. The hunter sighed. Does she tell you to stay out of it too? The pair stood in silence a moment, eyes on the floor. Then the horse in the next stall took an interest in the hunter's hair, and he jumped at the sudden moisture on his neck. Well, listen. He continued, trying to sound calm but earnest. This is different. She needs help. This thing, it's dangerous. We gotta go. He took a step closer, holding the bit out to the beast. But Pebble didn't move. Just think. What the hell am I going to tell Brack if something happens to her? Besides, she's got to teach me how to shoot 2 arrows like she did. He felt something grab his throat, and he dropped his eyes. Listen, I really need you to get your butt in gear. If not, I'm fucking running. I'll go now if it means... He fell silent, just a strange man bargaining with a horse. Suddenly there was warmth on his palms. He looked up to see Pebble had taken the bit. Yes, fuck yes, he exclaimed, rubbing the mare's neck like he'd seen Aela do. Hang on, just let me get up. No stirrups, no problem. The hunter climbed the pen wall and practically flung himself on the horse's back. After a moment getting situated, and several more neck pats to apologize for the doubtless trying experience, the hunter cautiously prodded the horse's hips with his heels. Let's go get her. Pebble jolted into motion, and before the hunter knew it, Masser and Secunda were shining down on them, bright as day. Hircine's luck, the hunter breathed. As they navigated the streets of Sheerstep, the hunter getting gradually used to steering, a pair of yellow sashes flitted out of an alley and ran past them.
Guardsmen!
The hunter called.
How goes the fight?
The 2 stopped and looked back to him.
Things have gone quiet,
said one.
There are fires on the north side, but we're managing. Stay calm.
Where's Aela?
The huntress?
The other guard perked up, interested.
The Wolf of Whiterun was there?
I didn't see her. Did you?
No.
Can't help you, citizen. Rest assured your homes are safe.
He turned to his companion.
Let's go.
The guards took off up the road, and the hunter reined Pebble around to follow. Gone quiet? He mused to the horse. Sounds like she did all right, eh? To his surprise, the mare continued to turn until it had done a full 180 and started walking south out of the village. Pebble? The hunter questioned. Are you sure? Shouldn't we head for the action? Just then, a sound rang out from the rocky tundra before him. A long, high howl. Quiet at first, as if carried by wind, then growing, revealing itself to be borne by some other, immense power. It washed over the hunter, and his grip tightened on the reins. Yeah, you're sure, he muttered, and bent low over the steed as it galloped out of Sheerstep off into the great eastern saddle. Bracknell's bones were stiffer than the rod up the Emperor's ass. He winced as he descended the steps of the Cloud District. He disliked stairs. They tired him on the way up and bruised him on the way down. He longed for the smooth slopes and climbs of the mountains where one could take their time and feet fell on gentle weeds and dirt. The thought floated through his mind once again that he might need a walking stick or even a cane. No, he decided, not quite yet. His pride was still a little too strong for that. Rehab had been a steep road, and it stood to get even steeper ahead. In no uncertain terms, his body had been shattered like a glass doll. The hands that glued him back together were skilled, but inadequate. He felt the cracks throughout his self, in every step, right down to his fingers. At moments, he even felt them in his mind. More often was it that he lost the plot of his days, and sometimes forgot the men before him. No, it would take time and time yet before he would once again climb to his perch. He contemplated stopping in the Garden of Kinnereth for a rest, but felt he might doze the night away if he allowed it. So he pushed on to Jorvaskr. The building was silent as the dead, with most of the guild out on the search for the missing girl. However, the distinctive scent of pipeweed drew Bracknell to the back porch. Kodlak Whitemane, the man, it was said, whose grand deeds of heroism and valor were too numerous to fit in 10 encyclopedic volumes, sat tame as a resting cat by the glow of a low-burning brazier.
That's the Shallon's Heath, if my nose don't deceive me.
The old warrior smiled at Bracknell's approach.
That it is, old hound. Have a seat.
I never took you for a man of such expensive taste.
Bracknell grunted, taking the chair beside the Harbinger.
In my rest, it seems I have picked up some noble habits. Never cared for the stuff when there was glory at hand. Care for a puff?
Don't mind if I do.
The old hunter leaned forward, taking the pipe and coaxing out a few good draws.
Was the wizard of any help?
Oaf's got to stick up his bum high as the spires of Dragon's Reach. But he pointed us in the right direction.
Reaching into his pack, he brandished a small travel journal.
We recorded what was most relevant, but still have nothing in the way of a battle plan.
Progress, though.
And too late, I fear, with all us spread out like this. How goes the search?
Fruitless. No riders have been sent, but we've heard from travelers that the Circle are conducting stops. Vilkas in the north, Farkas in the west, Skjor in the south, and Aela in the east.
Who went with Aela?
Not sure. The woman who brought news says she kept only one with her.
Blast, that'll be stranger.
The old Nord rubbed his brow.
I'll have to have a word with her once this is done.
Get Skjor to tell her. She might listen then.
What good are we if simple counsel is beyond us?
Ours is not to counsel. Ours is to see that counsel is given. These are our days of peace, the goal of any warrior.
Peace.
Bracknell shook his head, taking another puff and passing the pipe back.
Peace is wasted on us.
Kodlak grinned ruefully.
Hear, hear.
The old Nord smacked his lips.
A hint of cloves, isn't it?
You'd know better than I. Yorlin lent me it.
Yorland, eh?
Bracknell scoffed.
Truly, a habit for the restful.
He looked then to Kodlak, noting the noble slope of his nose and the deep shadows of his eyes.
And here in your rest it finds you, and finds you as weary as I've ever seen. What ails you, friend?
The Harbinger sunk into his chair, brave posture deflating as age pulled him to the earth.
Hound indeed, eh, Brack?
It's not for nothing that I'm here.
Kodlak chuckled.
Then bid you lean in. These words cannot go far.
Bracknell did so, back popping. The light of the fire briefly illuminated the deep pits beneath withered brow, flickering bright off Kodlak's emerald eyes.
My mind turns to the mists of Sovngarde.
Bracknell cocked his head curiously at this, and regarded the old warrior with a searching eye. It widened as the true depth of those words washed over him.
Well, that is a puzzle, isn't it?
One you've grappled with before, as I understand it.
Indeed, but I've never found a shred of hope in it. The Lord of the Hunt does not lightly give up their own.
And it is not for mortals to renege on deals with gods. But that's assuming the deal was with a god at all. That's assuming the Lord alone can bestow the gift.
Is that not so?
A Jarl may kill a man without ever meeting him. He need only hear his crime and send down his judgment.
And so go the gods. An emissary.
A chance, Bracknell. A mortal chance.
The Harbinger's green eyes flashed like striking stones.
I am close now. So close to the answer. But in this search, two things become clear. A journey is afoot, and flesh is failing me. I will need a company.
And you have it, all of your Vaskar should you wish it.
Bracknell, if you understand of what I speak, then you know we are not of one mind on this.
To ride with you, there is enough honor to sway any whelp.
Yet what good would a whelp do me? This is not some cheap errand, nor is it a light trek. I need those who are willing and brave, yes, but moreover, proven and long of foot.
Bracknell sat back in his chair and regarded the knight before him.
Now I see why you bring this to me.
I bring it to you, for you are my friend, and you should know.
Kodlak, don't think 'cause you bring me hope in one hand, you can offer me shit in another. I would not send him in blind. You cannot lean on me for that. We must put it all before him.
And we will. Don't you worry.
Who else have you told?
Of my aim, several. Of my progress?
The Harbinger trailed off then, eyes growing wide. Legs shaking, he stood, pipe falling to the stone, and stepped toward the knight. Kodlak? Bracknell asked, standing himself. But the old hero didn't answer. His head turned this way and that, as if listening for some news on the wind.
Kodlak,
he repeated. Silence was cast between them like a long, searching line. Nothing moved but the flickering of the coals in the brazier and the spent pipeweed scattering across the stone. Then, as if a hook finally setting, the Harbinger spun back to Bracknell, his eyes for the briefest moment glowing red.
It's Aela,
he said, walking towards the wall and taking up a huge double-handed cudgel.
She calls for aid.
With that, he opened a large latch on the side of the hall. Beneath was a massive sheet of mammoth skin. Grunting with effort, he slammed the club upon the taut surface with such force the great upturned boat that was Jorvaskr thundered like a drum. He struck again, and several times over, before bursting through the door and calling in a voice few had heard the venerable Nord use.
Awake, Jorvaskr! Awake! We ride now! We ride east! To arms! To steeds! Awake!
As every whelping warrior tucked away in beds or draped over couches, roused and rushed for their armor, Kodlak turned back to Bracknell.
Arm yourself, old hound. Glory is not through with us yet.
Thank you for listening to the Skyrim audio adventure. 2024 has come to a close. I was hoping to get 6 episodes out this year at least. I got 5 out, so, pretty close. But hey, the project overcame a fair bit of adversity this year, and going forward, I'm pretty sure I have ways of making this all more efficient. So hopefully I can outdo myself next year, and hopefully you'll all still be there to, appreciate it. Aela the Huntress was voiced by Kat Loveland. Binwick, or Ol'bin, was voiced by Joseph MacDonald. We got Mafu back in this one to voice Nim, the character that she created, so that's great. Kodlak Whitemane was played by Patrick McCook. Aelerine was played by Riley McLean. The vampire was played by Juho Seppa. Olu Abisogun, Milica Radovanovic, and Andrew Goulding all lent their voices as various guards and background vocals. I ain't got much else to say, only that I hope that you all have a great new year, and that I wish you all health and prosperity going forward. And once again, thanks for listening.